Just because it's an EV doesn't mean that you have to fire your interior designers and just put iPads in there. So it looks like GMC has just unveiled a transformer, and that is the Sierra EV Denali Edition 1. It has 754 horsepower and 785 pound-feet of torque, 400 miles of range. We're gonna see if that's true or not when they put it to test in the real world. And the price is going to land for the Denali. This is the one that they're gonna launch, and then they're gonna be cheaper versions later. But the Denali is gonna cost $108,695. So it's not a blue-collar workman's truck anymore, I would say. 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds. So what I want to do in this video is look at this design. I think it's a really cool design. I want to compare it to the non-EV Sierra, and also show you the interior of the non-EV, comparing it to the EV Sierra, and what I think they could have done better, and what I think a lot of manufacturers could have done better. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the spec and tech here before we go into Photoshop. So it's charging speeds up to 350 kilowatts, which is pretty good. This means that it can charge 100 miles of range in about 10 minutes. Not bad at all. And this Denali Edition 1 can tow up to 9,500 pounds. Probably gonna reduce the range with about 50%. In the interior, you have a 16.8-inch infotainment screen, and you also have an 11-inch completely digital gauge cluster. We're gonna talk more about that a little later, and rides on 24-inch wheels. This specific model that they show here in these promo videos have terrain tires on it, but those are not gonna go into production. That has been confirmed. Probably more like the standard Denali that we see right here. So let's have a look at this design. The thing with this thing is that I think it looks like a traditional truck, but at the same time it looks very futuristic and super transformer-ish. And what I mean by that is, just look at the front end graphics. We have this line right here, which is typical for GMC to have one cut line that kind of marks the starting point for all the graphics that goes on underneath it. But there is so much graphic features to look at here. We have this framing of the body color frames, the sides right here, and then we have these fog lights, dual fog lights. It looks like. And we have a pretty typical GMC Sierra light bar, but it's thicker here. And I really like this design of the light bar. I think it creates a really strong identity for the EV and separates it from the regular Sierra, but at the same time keeping a strong, family DNA still intact with this graphics. And then you can see that the grille, compared to the normal Sierra here, is covered up, which is typical for EVs, as I'm sure you know. But I don't think it looks bad. It looks really good because, for example, Tesla has this front end where everything is covered up, but there's nothing going on. It's just a flat surface. It's kind of a very conservative and boring design. But here, it's complemented by a lot of chamfers and graphic pieces and textures. For example, this piece at the bottom, I really like the vents right here. It looks it looks almost like a computer in the front end, and I think it kind of suits the EV-ness of this truck to have more of a computer design than we have, for example, in the normal Sierra right here. This feels more like an automotive design and more emotional and more beautiful lines, attention to details, while this feels pretty much like a product design. But there's nothing wrong with that. I still think it's a really good looking truck, specifically when we look at the side view and the proportions of this thing. And then we have, in addition to all the graphics I just mentioned, we now have some other things or LEDs sticking in right here, creating more of a busy front end. But at the same time, if you're gonna remove the grille completely, you need to fill that space up with something interesting. And I think they did a pretty decent job here on the Sierra EV. Looking at the normal Sierra, you can see what I'm talking about right here. It just feels more like a automotive design that has more fluidity to it and not a lot of different separate graphic features in the front end of this design. Looking at the side view, look at this. This is typical EV truck as well. We don't have this separation between the bed and the cab. And what this does, I believe, is that it gives the rear passengers more space, because this these couple of inches here are now fused together between the cab and the bed. And you also have a bit of an angle on this design, as you can see here, creating more of a sporty look, but also probably helps a lot with wind flow and aerodynamics. But we still have this line intact. So look at the side view right here. This line carves into the door, which I think is a nice touch. This brings back a little bit of that automotive design that I want to see in EVs, and not just being a product. And we have some nice flow in this design right here. We have a similar design, almost inverted, in the normal Sierra. And this right here on the side view of the normal Sierra is the AT4X, as you can see, and it has been confirmed that the new Sierra EV is actually going to come in an AT4 trim, which I think is going to be really cool to see how they're going to turn this Denali luxury version right here into a more rugged off-road looking machine. I think it's going to look like a beast. Looking at the rear view, this is another thing that I prefer over I think I prefer this over the normal Sierra. I like this design as well. I think it's very clean. But there is a lot going on in the tailgate right here that I would like to simplify, and it looks like they simplified it a lot. You still have this separate opening of the top part right here, but then looking at this piece below it, it's a very simple surface and not too much going on like we have right here in the regular Sierra. Really like the treatment of the front end graphics and the rear end taillights as well, because looking at this, it has a connection to the front end. This is almost the exact same shape as we have in the headlights. Even with the thicker portion here, you have the same thing going on here in this headlight. So you have the same connection in the graphic features as well in the truck, more so than you have in the normal Sierra, which has this C shape in the front end, and then it has a little bit of a C shape, but not, it doesn't resemble the front lights as well as the EV does, both front and rear. Now looking at the interior, and this is one thing that I kind of wish manufacturers would do a little differently. I do understand that EVs in their nature are more clinical, and they're more soulless because it doesn't have a rumble and engine, internal combustion explosions going on under the hood. Instead, it's electricity, obviously. So it feels like when you do that, you want to make the interior feel even warmer than the equivalent internal combustion engine to compensate for that. But it feels like EV cars and manufacturers today, they go in the opposite direction, and they make it feel even more cold in the interior. And I think this is a pretty cold interior, specifically when you look at the brand new Sierra 2022 up here, and how beautifully sculpted this is, and the vents going into this chamfer, and then you have a nice screen in the center, feeling pretty integrated. But look at this integration of the gauge cluster here. This is a screen that just pops up out of the dash, while in the normal Sierra, it's still digital. You can still have the digital gauges if you want to. I'm not opposed to that, but I am opposed to having screens and having laptops popping up everywhere in the interior, instead of designing something beautiful around them and put some more effort into making it feel warm and welcoming going into an EV. If I were to pick between these interiors, I would definitely 100% go with the internal combustion engine interior, and I think they could have made something similar to this and just applied it into an EV. Just because it's an EV doesn't mean that you have to fire your interior designers and just put iPads in there. Put some effort into making it feel warm and welcoming, even if they are EVs.